Recording. Good evening, everybody. We have a challenging subject in front of us tonight, reconceiving God. Whatever the heck that means. It's going to take us to an interesting place or two that you've never been. But I first want to welcome you to Flatland. Tonight I'm going to share with you the interactions Jung had with a 5,000-year-old conception of God that he met during his journey through the imaginal realm. This lengthy exchange vividly depicts the confrontation of ancient and modern views of God, as well as Jung's efforts to save this old God from impending death. As we will see, his solution happily leads to the rebirth of this concept of God in a new childlike form. But before we dive into this story, I need to clarify the different forms of God Jung encounters in the Red Book. During his later life, Jung was asked on numerous occasions if he was trying to create a new religion. He strongly denied this allegation. He explicitly asserted that everything he had said about God had nothing to do with what he called the metaphysical God, or God as he exists in himself. Only a theologian would venture to make such statements. As a psychologist, he was strictly concerned with the conceptions of God human beings carry around in their own heads. This psychic God, or God imago, as Jung calls it, is infinitely variable, often having only the loosest connection with the metaphysical God. So you may be wondering why I've chosen to zero in on this particular story in the Red Book. Well, here we are 65 years after Jung's death, with most of humanity still suffering the long-lasting effects of the death of the God concept, a death that Nietzsche first identified in 1885. By that time, the miraculous advances of science had worn away humanity's faith in the centuries-old conceptions of God to which it had clung so fervently. Since then, the vast majority of human beings have lost their bearings in the world. Without a concept of God capable of adequately resolving the questions posed by their developing intelligence, countless people have had no way of knowing why they are here, how the world is structured, nor which direction their lives should take. They clutch at materialism, unaware of any other strategy. As the recent alarming increase in mental health issues shows, individuals are succumbing to paralyzing anxiety and despair one by one. They simply don't know why they should go on. So the contemporary American thinker Ken Wilber describes the period we were living in as a time characterized by widespread superficiality, triviality, and insignificance. He calls it Flatland. Let's just bring up the reading so that you can see what he had to say about that. Okay, Linda would love to read something by Ken Wilber.
I would.
Okay, here she goes, number one.
Reading number one. It is not the forces of darkness, but of shallowness that everywhere threaten the true, the good, and the beautiful, and that ironically announce themselves as deep and profound. It is an exuberant, fearless shallowness, a product of Flatland ideology, that everywhere is the modern danger, the modern threat, and that everywhere nonetheless calls to us as savior. We're lost in a world dedicated to surfaces and shadows, exteriors and shells, whose prophets lovingly exhort us to dive into the shallow end of the pool head first. Ken Wilber, Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality.
So a Flatland worldview can only locate spirit in the body, in sex, in the earth, in life, in vitality, and in diversity. And there's a little bit more from a different book. Robert is going to read this one for us.
We moderns and postmoderns live almost entirely within this flat and faded world of endless sensory forms. This superficial world of drab and dreary surfaces, whether with capitalism or Marxism, industrialism or eco-psychology, patriarchal science or ecofeminism. In most cases, our God or goddess is one we can register with our senses, see with our eyes, rap with our feelings, worship with sensations, a God we can sink our teeth into, and that exhausts its form.
Okay, thank you. So, Wilber's sobering view of mankind's love affair with the material aspects of reality is shared by Baha'is. In a letter written in 1935, Shoghi Effendi, the great-grandson of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, who became the guardian of the faith from 1921 to 1957, analyzed the social environment in which youth found themselves in those days. Remember, 1935. Okay, Milton, here we go.
The chief reason for the evils now rampant in society is the lack of spirituality. The materialistic civilization of our age has so much absorbed the energy and interest of mankind that people in general no longer feel the necessity of raising themselves above the forces and conditions of their daily material existence. There is not sufficient demand for things that we call spiritual to differentiate them from the needs and requirements of our physical existence. The universal crisis affecting mankind is, therefore, essentially spiritual in its causes. The spirit of the age, taken on the whole, is irreligious. Man's outlook on life is too crude and materialistic to enable him to elevate himself into the higher realms of the spirit. Shoghi Effendi, that's in Directives from the Guardian.
Okay, thank you. So Baha'is believe that we're living in the midst of a worldwide transition as humanity evolves to the next stage of its destiny. The days of humanity's adolescence are gradually giving way to its early adulthood. Having killed off our teenaged God, mankind is now engaged in a desperate search for a more robust, more grown-up conception of God, one more in keeping with its slowly evolving consciousness. This, then, is the atmosphere surrounding Jung's experiences with a dazzling array of concepts of God. Over the course of his Red Book, Jung dramatizes a steady transformation of the God concept from a collapsing externalized Christian image into an inner dialectical self-symbol that culminates provisionally in the radiant Phanes and the paradoxical totality of Abraxas, which we'll see later. Across this arc, figures such as Izdubar, Atmaviktu, Ka, Phanes, and Abraxas successively embody shifts in how divinity is experienced. From heroic myth, which is Izdubar, to life spirit, which is Atmaviktu, to daimonic shadow, which is Ka, to the newly appearing god, Phanes, and finally the union of opposites, Abraxas. So given our limited time this evening, I will concentrate primarily on Izdubar and then deal with Phanes and Abraxas fairly briefly. Goes without saying that this subject deserves much greater attention. Okay, so let's talk about Izdubar. In the second part of the Red Book, called Liber Secundus, or the second book, The 8th chapter is called First Day. Here Jung's path is blocked by a desolate mountain range. He locates a narrow valley gorge that allows him to proceed. Okay, Elizabeth, how about number 4?
Okay. The way leads inevitably between two high rock faces. My feet are bare and injure themselves on the jagged rocks. Here the path becomes slippery. One half of the way is white, the other black. I step onto the black side and recoil horrified. It is hot iron. I step onto the white half. It is ice. But so it must be. I dart across and onward, and finally the valley widens into a mighty rocky basin. A narrow path winds up along vertical rocks to the mountain ridge at the top. As I approach the top of the mountain, mighty booming resounds from the other side of the mountain, like ore being pounded. The sound gradually swells and echoes thunderously in the mountain. As I reach the pass, I see an enormous man approach from the other side. This is Jung, a reader's edition.
Okay. Thank you. So Jung is terrified by this new imaginal figure. But more strangely, the fellow himself also appears to be terrified. Okay, so who's likely to read this part? Number 5. Okay, Sherry and Bill. Which one tonight?
Two bullhorns rise from his great head, and a rattling sweet suit of armor covers his chest. His black beard is ruffled and checked with exquisite stones. The giant is carrying a sparkling double axe in his hand, like those used to strike bulls. Before I can recover from my amazed fright, the giant is standing before me. I look at his face. It is faint and pale and deeply wrinkled. His almond-shaped eyes look at me astonished. Horror takes hold of me. This is Izdubar, the mighty, the bull man. He stands and looks at me. His face speaks of consuming inner fear, and his hands and knees tremble. Izdubar, the powerful bull, trembling? Is he frightened?
So we can think of Jung's Izdubar as an ancient concept of God. He appears as a gigantic, godlike bullman, representing an ancient, heroic, Near Eastern image of divinity and cosmic power. The Mesopotamian Gilgamesh epic exhibits the universal themes of the hero's journey, mortality, and the search for meaning, all of which Jung is seeking to integrate into his own psychological understanding. So this is the image that he painted of Izdubar. There's a lot of detail in here, but you can see he's a fairly massive being, and there's his long axe. Okay. So Jung's Izdubar is a visionary figure modeled on the ancient Gilgamesh. However, this is a symbolic inner image rather than the literal mythic king. The name Izdubar is an older scholarly misreading of the Mesopotamian hero Gilgamesh's name from the cuneiform tablets of the Gilgamesh epic. It seems that Jung deliberately keeps the archaic form to stress that his Izdubar is related to, but not identical with, the epic hero. So here is a statue of Gilgamesh at the University of Sydney in Australia. And it has the following inscription on the bronze plaque beside it. And Lisa is going to read that one for us. That's number 6.
Sorry. Gilgamesh, Assyrian king of Uruk during the 3rd millennium BC, is part god and part man. He sets out on a quest to seek immortality. In the course of his quest, he finds compassion, friendship, courage, love, and peace. In the 19th century, Sir Austen Henry Layard found clay tablets recounting the Epic of Gilgamesh in Ashurbanipal's 8th century BC library at Nineveh. This epic, one of the oldest written stories, is the basis of many myths, legends, and tales, including modern ones.
Okay, thank you. So Jung proceeds to have a conversation with Izdubar in which he tells him that he comes from the West, a world dominated by science and rationality. So Seppi made an excellent suggestion earlier that we have two readers for these conversations. So a back and forth. So Thomas is the next person to have his hand up. So he gets his choice as to whether to be Jung or Izdubar. So which would you like to do?
Izdubar.
Okay. So who would like to be the exponent of the modern world, Carl Jung?
I can be if no one else is.
Okay, thank you, Seppi. Okay, so you get to start. This will go on for several readings, so bear with us. So we're starting with number 7.
Oh, Izdubar, most powerful, spare my life and forgive me for lying like a worm in your path.
I do not want your life. Where do you come from?
I come from the West.
You come from the West? Do you know of Western lands? Is this the right way to the Western lands?
I come from a Western land whose coast washes against the great Western Sea.
Does the sun sink in that sea? Or does it touch the solid land in its decline?
The sun sinks far beyond the sea.
Beyond the sea? What lies there?
There is nothing but empty space there. As you know, the earth is round, and moreover, it turns around the sun.
Damned one, where do you get such knowledge? So there is no immortal land where the sun goes down to be reborn? Are you speaking the truth?
You can read this part, Seppi.
His eyes flicker with fury and fear. He steps a thundering pace closer. I tremble.
So in Egyptian mythology, the Western lands, meaning the western bank of the Nile, were the land of the dead, which is appropriate, as you'll see next class. Jung's assertions flatly contradict Izdubar's view of the world. And Jung has further revelations from his homeland to share with the now frightened God. Okay, so we're going to switch down to number 8. And Seppi will continue.
Oh, Izdubar, most powerful one, forgive my presumptuousness, but I'm really speaking the truth. I come from a land where this is proven science and where people live who travel round the world with their ships. Our scholars know through measurement how far the sun is from each point of the surface of the earth. It is a celestial body that lies unspeakably far out in unending space.
Unending, did you say? Is the space of the world unending, and we can never reach the sun?
Most powerful one, insofar as you are mortal, you can never reach the sun. I see him overcome with suffocating fear.
I am mortal, and I shall never reach the sun, and never reach immortality. He
He smashes
smashes.
his
Oh,
sorry.
Go,
He
go ahead, Seppi.
smashes his axe with a powerful clanging blow on the rock.
be gone, miserable weapon! You are not much use. How should you be of use against infinity, against the eternal void, and against the unreplenishable? There is no one left for you to conquer. Smash yourself. What's it worth?
In the west, the sun sinks into the lap of glowing clouds in bright crimson.
So, go away, sun, thrice damned God, and wrap yourself in your immortality.
He snatches the smashed piece of his axe from the ground and hurls it toward the sun.
Here you have your sacrifice, your last sacrifice.
He collapses and sobs like a child. I stand shaking and hardly dare stir.
So I have to apologize, Thomas. There was a typo in the version that I sent out on Sunday, and it was the word that you read as eternal. And I forgot somehow or other, missed putting an E at the front, so it should have been eternal. So I fixed it in the one that we're on the screen with, but it's a small point. So in the infinitely malleable imaginal realm, Jung's Western scientific outlook begins to poison Izdubar. When Jung tells him about modern astronomy and the impossibility of physically reaching the sun, Izdubar collapses as a sick god, symbolizing in a dramatic form how rationalism cripples traditional images of God. Okay, so now we're here back with our two narrators.
Miserable worm, where did you suckle on this poison?
O Izdubar, most powerful one, what you call poison is science. In our country, we are nurtured on it from youth. And that may be one reason why we haven't properly flourished and remain so dwarfish. When I see you, however, it seems to me as if we are all somewhat poisoned.
No stronger being has ever cut me down. No monster has ever resisted my strength. But your poison, worm, which you have placed in my way, has lamed me to the marrow. Your magical poison is stronger than the army of Tiamat.
He lies as if paralyzed, stretched out on the ground.
You gods, help! Here lies your son, cut down by the invisible serpent's bite in his heel. Oh, if only I had crushed you when I saw you and never heard your words.
O Izdubar, great and pitiable one, had I known that my knowledge could cut you down, I would have held my tongue. But I wanted to speak the truth.
You call poison truth? Is poison truth, or is truth poison? Do not our astrologers and priests also speak the truth? And yet theirs does not act like poison.
Okay, very good, guys. We're going to continue in a minute. In Babylonian mythology, Tiamat, the mother of the gods, waged war with an army of demons. At this point in the story, night is falling around Jung and Izdubar. Since they're in the mountains, it will soon get very cold. Jung offers to build a fire. Izdubar agrees. So this is Seppi's line, I think.
Mhm. I gathered wood and lit a big fire.
The holy fire warms me. Now tell me, how did you make a fire so swiftly and mysteriously?
All I need are matches. Look, they are small pieces of wood with a special substance at the tip. Rubbing them against the box produces fire.
That is astonishing. Where did you learn this art?
Oh, everyone has matches where I come from, but this is the least of it. We can also fly with the help of useful machines.
You can fly like birds? If your words did not contain such powerful magic, I would say to you, you were lying.
I'm certainly not lying. Look, I also have a timepiece, for example, which shows the exact time of day.
This is wonderful. It is clear that you come from a strange and marvelous land. You certainly come from the blessed Western lands. Are you immortal?
We could just go right on, Seppi.
I, immortal? There is nothing more mortal than we are.
What? You are not even immortal, and yet you understand such arts?
Unfortunately, our science has still not yet succeeded in finding a method against death.
Who then taught you such arts?
In the course of centuries, men have made many discoveries through precise observation and the science of outer things.
But this science is the awful magic that has lamed me. How can it be that you are still alive even though you drink from this poison every day?
We've grown accustomed to this over time because men get used to everything. But we're still somewhat lamed. On the other hand, this science also has great advantages, as you've seen. What we've lost in terms of force, we've rediscovered many times through mastering the force of nature.
Isn't it pathetic to be so wounded? For my part, I draw my own force from the force of nature. I leave the secret force to the cowardly conjurers and womanly magicians. If I crush another's skull to pulp, that will stop his awful magic.
But don't you realize how the touch of our magic has worked upon you? Terribly, I think.
Unfortunately, you are right.
So, as Jung's shocking revelations of modern science's discoveries sink in, Izdubar groans in despair. That's number 12.
Most terrible day of my life, unending, so long, so long. Wretched magical art, our priests know nothing, or else they could have protected me from it. Even the gods die. He says, have you no gods anymore?
No, words are all we have.
But are these words powerful?
So they claim, but one notices nothing of this.
We do not see the gods either, and yet we believe that they exist. We recognize their workings in natural events.
Science has taken from us the capacity of belief.
What? You have lost that too? How then do you live?
Silence descends. It is late at night. We fall asleep next to the fire.
Oh, well done, you two. We haven't quite finished the story, but that's the bulk of it. So Jung interrupts the flow of the story with 8 pages of reflection on the contents of its first half. When he resumes, he calls it Second Day. And in this particular situation, this is what he painted. Now you can see that Izdubar is lying on his back on the ground here. He's seriously ill now. He's mortally wounded by Jung's words. Feeling terribly guilty, Jung spends the whole of the next day desperately seeking some way to restore the god to life. He doesn't want him to wither away miserably. He can't expect any help from the West because no one will travel the hot, cold path. He asked Izdubar if anyone in the East would assist them. Okay, now we pick up the story again, and it's number 13.
The way there is long and lonely, and when you reach the plains after crossing the mountains, you will meet the powerful sun which will blind you.
But what if I wandered by night, and if I sheltered from the sun during the day?
In the night, all the serpents and dragons crawl out of their holes, and you, unarmed, will inevitably fall victim to them. Let it be. How would this help? My legs have withered and are numb. I prefer not to bring home the booty of this journey.
So, retiring to a ridge of the mountains, Jung considers their options. He suddenly realizes that Izdubar is hardly real in the ordinary sense, but is actually a fantasy. Jung assumes that Izdubar will refuse to accept that he is a fantasy, instead claiming that he is completely real. Even so, he decides he'd better appeal to him. As he expected, Izdubar doesn't see why he should consider himself a fantasy. And that's number 14 now.
I am terrified by this thought. It is murderous. Do you even mean to declare me unreal, now that you have lamed me so pitiably?
Perhaps I have not made myself clear enough, and have spoken too much in the language of the Western lands. I do not mean to say that you are not real at all, of course, but only as real as a fantasy. If you could accept this, much would be gained.
What would be gained by this? You are a tormenting devil.
Pitiful one, I will not torment you. The hand of the doctor does not seek to torment, even if it causes grief. Can you really not accept that you are a fantasy?
Woe betide me. In what magic do you want to entangle me? Should it help me if I take myself for a fantasy?
You know that the name one bears means a lot. You also know that one often gives the sick new names to heal them. For with a new name, they come by a new essence. Your name is your essence.
You are right. Our priests also say this.
So, are you prepared to admit that you are a fantasy?
If it helps, yes.
So with Izdubar's agreement to become a fantasy, or we could think of it as a psychic image, he becomes light enough to carry. Jung lifts him up and places him on his back. He is, in fact, so light that Jung struggles to keep his feet on the ground. His light load lifts him into the air. He heads back down the rocky path towards his home in the Western lands. When they reach the bottom of the valley, the wind conveniently carries them up over the hot, perilous, and cold trail, allowing them to traverse the fields toward inhabited places. Soon they see a town in the distance.
What a wondrous country! But look, isn't that a town? Don't you want to go there?
No, God forbid. I don't want a crowd together, since the enlightened live there. Can't you smell them? They're actually dangerous, since they cook the strongest poisons from which even I must protect myself. The people there are totally paralyzed, wrapped in a brown poisonous vapor, and can move only with artificial means.
So Jung takes them to an out-of-the-way house owned by some friends who will take them in for the night. When they arrive, Jung realizes that the door is much too small for him to get Izdubar through it. However, he realizes that a fantasy takes up no space. So he squeezes Izdubar into the size of an egg and puts him in his pocket. Then he walks into the welcoming house where Izdubar should find healing. Once inside, Jung sits in a solitary place with his concealed God and quotes an old text. And that's, I think that should be Seppi reading this one.
Mm-hmm. Set the egg before you, the God in his beginning, and behold it, and incubate it with the magical warmth of your gaze.
So the next 5.5 pages of the Red Book are given over to the incantations he sings in the ancient manner. You're probably relieved that I didn't include them. The incantations achieve their purpose. Now, I think we should probably give Seppi a bit of a break. We've had a lot of readings by one person, two people, sorry. So maybe Jack could read this number 17. Now, this is Jung reflecting to himself.
On the evening of the third day, I kneeled down on the rug and carefully opened the egg. Something resembling smoke rises up from it, and suddenly Izdubar is standing before me, enormous, transformed, and complete. His limbs are whole, and I find no trace of damage on them. It's as if he had awoken from a deep sleep, he says.
Okay, Jack, we need to have somebody else to do this back and forth with you. So who else would like to read Izdubar's part? How about Sherry? Well, where am I? Where do you start?
Where am I? How narrow it is here, how dark, how cool. Am I in the grave? Where was I? It seemed to me as if I had been outside in the universe. Over and under me was an endlessly dark, star-glittering sky, and I was in a passion of unspeakable yearning. Streams of fire broke from my radiating body. I surged through blazing flames. I swam in a sea that wrapped me in living fires, full of light, full of longing, full of eternity. I was ancient and perpetually renewing myself, falling from the heights to the depths, and world glowing from the depths to the heights, hovering around myself amidst glowing clouds, as raining embers beating down like the foam of the surf, engulfing myself in stifling heat, embracing and rejecting myself in a boundless game. Where was I? I was completely sun.
Oh, Izdubar, Divine One, how wonderful! You are healed.
Healed? Was I ever sick? Who speaks of sickness? I was completely sun. I am the sun.
An inexpressible light breaks from his body at light that my eyes cannot grasp. I must cover my face and cast my gaze to the ground. You are the sun, the eternal light, most powerful one. Forgive me for carrying you. Wow.
Well, this is the painting he created to show you this. And here he is down at the bottom, kneeling in front of this little egg that has blossomed into this fantastic display of fire and light. So here's the god reborn due to the incantations that we didn't actually hear.
Reminds me of the genie in the bottle, Mark.
It is very similar, isn't it? So here is how Jung describes the end of this encounter. Jack, you might as well finish this one.
Okay.
And the next one. Sorry, 18 and then 19.
Okay. Everything is quiet and dark. I look around me. The empty eggshell is lying on the rug. I feel myself, the floor, the walls. Everything is as usual, utterly plain and utterly real. I would like to say that everything around me has turned to gold. But it is not true. Everything is as it always has been. Here reigned eternal light, immeasurable and overpowering.
So 5 or 6 years later, Jung commented on this motif of the renewed God. And Jack, you might as well finish off this 19.
The renewed God signifies a renewed attitude, that is, a renewed possibility for intensive life, a recovery of life, because psychologically God always denotes the greatest value, thus the greatest sum of the libido, the greatest intensity of life, the optimum of psychological life's activity.
Hmm.
C.G. Jung, Collected Works, 6 Psychological Types, paragraph 301.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's step back from the details and try to understand the meaning of Izdubar. For Jung, he personifies a living mythic God image that cannot survive if taken literally in a modern scientific consciousness, but can be reborn as an inner symbolic reality. His story in the Red Book signifies the transition from a literal external God to a symbolic inner archetypal divinity in somebody's psyche. His transformation into an egg and subsequent rebirth as the sun expresses Jung's idea that the divine must be incubated and realized within the individual soul as an archetypal experience, rather than imposed from outside as dogma. As a representation of the archetype of the hero and the ego's journey towards self-realization, Izdubar's story anticipates Jung's own individuation process. This hero's confrontation with mortality and the limits of human power mirrors Jung's own struggles and insights as he navigates the depths of the unconscious. So, at the visionary climax of the Red Book, the renewed God, formerly known as Izdubar, appears to Jung with a new name. His name is now Phanes, Phanes, who Jung describes as the newly appearing God and the divine child. So in April 1919, he created this image.
Cool.
So it's a very young child, right? He's portrayed as an androgynous winged child emerging from a cosmic egg. Jung identifies this figure with the Orphic Phanes, a primordial luminous god born from the world egg, who is associated with Eros, procreation, and the first emergence of light and order. Phanes was a deity of light and goodness, whose name means to bring light or to shine. He emerged from the abyss and gave birth to the universe. So Orphism is the name given to a set of religious beliefs and practices originating in the ancient Greek and Hellenistic world, associated with literature attributed to the mythical poet Orpheus, who descended into the Greek underworld and returned. Orphism has been described as a reform of the earlier Dionysian religion, which involved a reinterpretation or rereading of the myth of Dionysus and a reordering of Hesiod's Theogony, based in part on pre-Socratic philosophy. Scholars have suggested that Orphism is un-Greek, even Asiatic in conception, because of its inherent dualism. So in the Red Book, Phanes appears as a unifying symbol of the capital S self, which integrates the opposites that Jung encountered earlier, masculine and feminine, spiritual and chthonic, conscious and unconscious. This self stands at the inner center towards which the whole Red Book drama tends. In this Phanic phase, the God concept is no longer a dying external father, which was the Christian God, or a collapsing heroic sun god, such as Izdubar, but a newly hatched center of psychic totality, experienced as personal and more than personal. But ultimately, Jung felt that Phanes was limited by his exclusively positive energy. Having struggled for many years with the presence of evil in a system created by God, Jung was eager to include the dark side within his concept of God. So Phanes required a counter-image to be psychologically complete. This leads to the appearance of the concept of Abraxas, whose fullest elaboration is in the 7 Sermons to the Dead, but whose symbolism is bound to both the Red Book and Black Book material. The figure of Abraxas is traditionally depicted as a lion-headed deity with a serpent's tail. So here are two renderings of this character. I think this one's older than this one.
Cool.
Pretty unusual. And now here is Jung's own representation. Here is Abraxas in the middle. Abraxas is described as the lord of the physical world, a world creator of ambivalent nature from whom the tree of life grows, mirrored above by a light tree of fire and eros. In Jung's later psychological reading, Abraxas embodies the union of opposites beyond good and evil, transcending both the traditional God and the devil. It is a symbol of totality that contains creation and destruction, light and darkness, spirit and matter. Placed in relation to Phanes, Abraxas radicalizes the God concept. Phanes is a luminous, bordering self-center, while Abraxas signifies the still wider totality in which even that center and its negation are held together. The development of the God concept thus culminates not in a purified spiritual ideal, but in a figure of cosmic ambivalence, indicating that psychological wholeness requires embracing both the sun and the eternal sucking gorge of emptiness, as he so colorfully put it. Across the Red Book complex, the God image moves through distinct symbolic configurations that can be sketched schematically as follows. And I sent this to you the other day and said, don't look at this until we talk about the whole topic. So you can see down this left column the names of the different stages in his God concept. So taken together, Atma Victu, Ka, Izdubar, Phanes, and Abraxas map Jung's progressive reconstellation of the God concept from a collapsing Christian God up here to a radically dialectic inner symbol of totality, which includes heroic light, archaic life spirit, the daimonic shadow, luminous self, and a cosmos embracing union of opposites. All of these are involved in this last character here. So the third section of the Red Book is called Scrutinies. This contains some of the most important and far-reaching ideas in the Red Book, anticipating many of the central themes of Jung's mature psychology. His reflections on the God image and its relation to the self laid the groundwork for such later writings on the psychology of religion, including Answer to Job and Psychology and Religion, West and East. In these works, Jung developed his understanding of the religious function of the psyche, arguing that the experience of the divine is a fundamental aspect of human psychology. He saw the God image not as a literal external reality, but as a symbol of the self, the archetype of wholeness and meaning that guides the process of individuation. The concept of individuation, the lifelong process of psychological development and self-realization, finds its fullest expression in the Scrutinies. Jung's dialogues with his inner figures demonstrate the ongoing nature of this process, which requires a constant balancing and integration of the conscious and unconscious elements of the psyche. Okay, I have a feeling I might have lost some of you along the way. Now I get to look at your faces to see whether in fact that's true.
Mhm.
My goodness. That's a lot of material. And I want to really thank Seppi and Thomas for a great job of reading. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
That was above and beyond the call of duty. Okay, and I see we already have some hands raised here. So why don't we go to Seppi first of all?
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, was Carl Jung an artist? These images that you show us, were they drawn by him or by other people?
They're all his own work, but he would refuse to call himself an artist.
Oh, okay.
There's quite an interchange in part of the book about that. He's just doing his best to express what he actually saw. Yeah, but I think he turned into a very accomplished artist. Thank you very much. I don't know why.
Some of them are quite complicated.
Yes, they are. And that gives you a little bit of a hint of how variegated his artwork is. We haven't seen all of the different types that he used. But,
and what was other people's, or I don't know, the general public or the scientific community or the psychological community, what was their reactions to seeing these images? Or their, like what were their opinions of all of this?
That's a huge topic. And I think the jury isn't in yet, because the Red Book has only really been available since 2009. And I don't know how many people are aware of its existence, have opened up the big version to see the artwork. A lot of it is available now on the internet, so perhaps that will speed the process a little bit of the reactions. I have a feeling the scientists would really look down their noses at this. But even some Jungians find it very difficult to deal with this book. And I'm hoping that we can get Lynette to talk about that.
Thank you.
Okay, it's a big subject that you've raised. Is Lynette on here still? I can't see her. She was on earlier. Oh, there she is. Oh, there's nobody in her room. Okay.
Maybe they'll come back. Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope so. Okay, Robert, what are you thinking about?
In reading 11, he's talking about science, and Jung says we've been somewhat lamed, and then he talks about the advantages. Then he says what we've lost in terms of force, we've rediscovered many times through mastering the force of nature. So I'm not sure what force means in the first part of the sentence. And then Izdubar talks about drawing force from the force of nature.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So the statement is, on the other hand, this science also has great advantages, as you've seen. What we've lost in terms of force, we've rediscovered many times through mastering the force of nature. And then Izdubar says, I draw my own force from the force of nature. I leave the secret force to the cowardly conjurers and womanly magicians. So I guess he's, in the first instance, talking about a secret force of understanding how the world works, a spiritual force, perhaps. That would be my sense of it. How are you reading it? How did it make sense to you?
Yeah, I think the identification with the life force. I mean, when we became split with the subject and object process, we've lost that identification. We live in a kind of virtual reality of our own representations.
Yeah.
Instead of in the life of the body, for instance.
Yeah, so he's talking about the physical connection with the earth, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think that must be what he's really referring to here. I don't know. Okay, Bill or Sherry? and then Thomas.
Yes. So when I was listening to this, it just really to me like rang. I mean, I know there's other substantial dimensions, but it really to me rang like this is science in opposition, this battle, of wits, so to speak, where it was essentially science in opposition to the spiritual or the and that as Baha'is, we have pretty much put forth that Baha'u'llah has put forth that science and religion by nature or science and the spiritual by nature are in agreement with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so this whole like contrasting and stress between one idea of the universe and another idea of the universe or of God, it seems to me like it reflects the history of religion, but it doesn't really reflect the knowing of the nature of the universe or the nature of a universe which includes both science and religion in harmony with each other. So I'm wondering, how did we get from that point? And all of the stuff the Jung's doing is obviously after Baha'u'llah. So I'm just wondering, how do we get to that point to where we went from one kind, science in as enemy or opposition or threat to religion, to where we are now, or where some people are, where Baha'is are as a result of Baha'u'llah's vision, which actually happened prior to this process of opposition that's still ongoing.
Well, I mean, Baha'u'llah may have given us guidance on how to deal with these two titanic forces, but I don't know that the world, even today, has accepted that guidance en masse. But I would argue that this opposition that you're seeing played out in this story is kind of artificial, because he loved the coincidentia oppositorum, as he called it, the coincidence of opposites. So this was a wonderful place for him to show these two opposites banging their heads against each other. But what he is eventually going to come to is that these two have to be included in his concept of God, which he calls Abraxas. Okay, so he is not saying that this is a permanent divide. He doesn't really venture any explanation as to how you get to that place, because this is all happening in his own psyche, and it's kind of mysterious. A lot of it is not clear to him, and it's not clear to the reader, I think, as to how he gets from this opposition that you're talking about to a place of integration. Mm-hmm. But I think as a society, we have to work that out together. But he certainly saw the end result being a total integration of those. But you're not seeing it expressed clearly here. I mean, our time together is limited, so there's a lot of material that I just couldn't get at, couldn't bring forward. So it's too bad that the book was so expensive, because if everybody had a copy, I could have just said, read pages such and such and such and such, and we wouldn't have had to go through this whole long dialogue tonight. We could have assumed that everybody read it and then talked about the comments that we're getting now. So we're kind of hamstrung by physical reality in that sense. Okay, no problem. Jack, what are you thinking about?
Oh, a couple of things. First of all, Mark, I want to congratulate you again on such great in-depth research. It was so rich. You did lose me here and there along the way. It's pretty complicated stuff here and there, but I wanted to make a couple of comments. When you talked about the cosmic egg, this is fascinating, because As you know, the cosmic egg is a story of the origin of creation that cuts through several different cultures.
Yeah, yeah.
And it relates to the Big Bang. This is fascinating because in the mythology of the cosmic egg, the whole universe was contained in that egg. Everything was contained in the egg. Now, Georges Lemaitre, the Belgian priest and physicist who originated the idea of the Big Bang, his idea was very similar to the cosmic egg. He reasoned that, you know, everything evolved from this hot, dense singularity that expanded and the whole universe was contained within it. So here's a getting sort of back to just touching in a vague way on what Bill said. This is a point where science and religion actually can converge, mythology with science.
Hmm.
But the other point I wanted to make was, like Linda, I'm a great user of AI. And of course, I had to look up the reaction to Jung's Red Book, and it said that the Red Book has caused a reevaluation of the psychology of Jung. And they said that AI said that the Jungians love it, that it's a rich new source of material, but mainstream psychologists who are not Jungians, they're a bit skeptical of this as being in any way, shape, or form science in quotation marks, because it's very much the account of his personal mystical journey. So the opinions would seem to be divided about it. The Jungians seeing it as a whole new source of material to understand Jungian psychology, and the mainstream psychologists being a little more skeptical of it. Is, yeah, there it is, Georges Lemaitre. Thanks, Linda, Belgian scientist and priest. He came up with the original theory of the Big Bang,
Which he presented to Einstein, I believe, in a private chat they had while walking, which Einstein poo-pooed.
Yeah, they had a dialogue about it, but Einstein eventually came to accept it.
Mhm.
And interesting enough, even though Lemaitre was a priest, he didn't want the idea to be pushed as a, how shall I put it, a scientific doctrine that can be backed up by religion. And he actually petitioned the Pope. I think it was Pius XII at the time, I'm not sure, but the Pope wanted to make a big deal out of this, and Lemaitre said, no, no, Father, please don't do that. I don't want that. Religion and science are different magisteria, and I don't want this turned into a sort of religious backing of science or whatever. So it's quite a fascinating thing, that whole thing. But it struck me, Mark, that the Big Bang and the cosmic egg are very, very similar in their notions. So possibly an area where science and mythology can converge.
And one of the things I thought of when I saw that painting that Jung did of the this huge cloud of fire coming out of the little egg, it reminded me that Baha'u'llah talks about the reality of the essence of God being nothing but fire. That there's no way that anything, that's composed of elements can get anywhere near it. It's a beautiful passage about the different dimensions of fire that this non-entity is being described with.
Exactly.
So it's fascinating that Jung has used that image as the sun
Yeah, and that's exactly why, Mark, that Baha'u'llah rejected the idea, and I think it's in the Tabernacle of World Unity, that it was impossible for a mystic to be united with God because
Yeah.
he would burn up like a little crisp in
Yeah.
front of the sun. Yeah.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Thomas, what's going on over there?
Yeah, my reacting to talking about the question of what does that force mean,
Hmm.
and I was thinking, if you follow the the timeline and the thinking of Greek philosophers, they eventually ran dry on the idea of gods dancing around and mating with humans. By the time of Socrates, there was a growing skepticism on them over the existence of these gods. However, another interesting thing that was happening was something like Pythagoras. Pythagoras, to my mind, was making a mystery out of science and making it an exclusive kind of club with secrets that if you
Hmm.
knew the secrets, it somehow transformed your way of life. So that was kind of when I thought about that, it withdrew the audience from the scene and made this kind of religious scientific religious union a kind of private secret matter which only the initiate could participate in, and it
Hmm.
excluded the general population, which is a real shortfall, in a real weakness. And so, as you were pointing out, this Jung makes this religious experience again, where Christianity sort of dwindles down. Jung is trying to revive the participation of every human, who can contemplate about his own life and so forth, and his own inner development, which I think is a very positive contribution.
Hmm. Well, thanks for that insight into Pythagoras. I think that's really worth considering. Uh, Peter Kingsley, who I introduced you to last time, would agree fully with what you just said, and he would extend the list of people who were uh, thinking along those lines to Parmenides and Empedocles, particularly among the pre-Socratics, and then that gets extended into the rest of the Western world's history and also into the Islamic world. But that's a totally different topic, unfortunately, but it's a fruitful one to consider. Okay, Milton, been
Well,
very patient.
first of all, I really like what's been unpacked here. There's so much to consider. I hadn't thought of Pythagoras before, and that's interesting. I
Mm.
also had a thought about this whole concept of the force of nature versus the secret forces. And what was on page 11 here, or reading number 11? It's if I crush another skull to pulp, that will stop his awful magic. That really strikes me
Mm.
as almost this warrior type mentality. I don't want your fancy science. I'll fight my own battles. And
Mm.
and that's something that's really happened in the modern age. I mean, you know, physical strength. It's brains over brawn now. Science has really taken over. We can move earth with our bulldozers and dirt moving equipment, or we can fight wars by pushing buttons in a faraway place. And a lot of people still have a lot of have disdain for that, and maybe rightly so, especially the war part. But there's this whole thing about cowardly conjurers and unfortunately womanly magicians. I guess he didn't like women. But it's just I'll just pound them with my strength, and that really isn't how we work anymore. I'll leave it at that.
but he was 5,000 years old, so he was coming at it from a different perspective altogether.
Right, but he was encountering the modern, right? This was an encounter, or a dialogue between modern and ancient, and so I can see that too.
How about you, Lynette? What are you thinking about this presentation tonight?
Oh, good heavens. Well, what I've been holding on to is the nature of active imagination, which is what Jung kind of developed into coming into this kind of inner dialogue where everything is possible. The most extravagant thoughts and ideas and images and conversations can rise up out of the unconscious. And as I was reading this in preparation, I thought, wow, the average person would have a hard time swallowing this kind of fantasy or this kind of connection with the deep unconscious. But it's endless. I mean, the unconscious is endless. So if we're open enough to know of the immense depths is way out of our range, I think it's rather marvelous that he had the courage and the capacity to let himself go into that kind of a dialogue and be afraid of that image. He was really terrified, but then so was the God terrified.
Yeah.
So it just opens my admiration for the courage that it takes for Jung to let himself go there.
So while you were away from the computer, Seppi was asking a question that I thought you'd be in a position to answer, and that is, how has the Red Book been received? And she was asking about it by people in psychology or in science as compared to people at large. Have you got a sense of that yet?
I do have a sense of that. I think, in a way, the wider world isn't ready for this. It's so kind of beyond the average mind, and those who embrace it truly embrace it. That it's the community of Jungian analysts and therapists who have come into contact with this value this a great deal. It's very hard to communicate that to people who are living in a much more dogmatic oriented world. They'll just think that it's crazy. Right?
Yeah. Well, let's face it, it challenges a lot of preconceived notions that we carry around with us, maybe even unconsciously.
Exactly.
So they might feel threatened by it for sure. Yeah.
These things that come along take a long time to be digested in a society, in a civilized world. Never mind uncivilized world. It takes a long time for evolutions of new awarenesses.
Even the language he uses is so developed, so eloquent, so very scholarly. I think that's why you like it, because you're a scholar. And there's some. I mean, this is, of course, we're reading the translation, but there's something so special about reading how he words things, even if we put aside the more important thing, which is the imagery itself. Just in terms of the language he uses, it's more rich than what a lot of people are reading today. So I'm thinking the imagery is even more important, and it's huge and probably not quite as accessible not as accessible to many people. But even the language is probably not accessible to many people because a lot of people are reading very short text messages or things online, or when they read books, it's much lighter, much easier.
Words more
And
superficial.
the language uses is a beautifully literary, complex, imagistic language with very beautiful words, wording, vocabulary. So even that is accessible for people who read a lot, for sure, but not to everybody,
Mhm.
I think.
Excellent points. Yeah.
I was hear Gilgamesh being mentioned, and when you said it was an Assyrian king, is that what you said? Assyrian king? And I thought Gilgamesh was Assyrian, and obviously you said you mentioned, or the person you quoted mentioned that these myths had been transmuted into many myths and cultures around the world, but it was the first reading in our English literature book when I did grade 12 English literature.
Oh, was it? Oh, good for you.
First one, and it was considered, well, our teacher in grade 12, that would have been 1988 to 89. She said this is the first piece of English literature that we have extant that we know of. So I remembered it from that context. So when you said it's all over the place, he went all over the world, that Gilgamesh.
Yeah. So I'm very curious to hear what Laurie Larkin is thinking about all this.
Yeah.
From your, because you've got a practical angle on this that most of us don't have.
I think that I'm just trying to figure it's all coming in visuals. It's hard to pull it apart. But I think that he's onto something. I think that using the arts, like expressive arts, for example, we have this opportunity now. He sort of set this foundation for realizing that you can go into your inner world and find the answers you need. And you can use the arts to source those answers. I haven't done a little bit of what he's done, but not to the extent that in terms of the experience of um, going into the inner world, and you get into flow and you decenter, and then you go back and you analyze your work and realize what the messages are that are coming forward. I think he has his own archetypes, and I think that when I work with clients, like their own images will come up that will give them the messages that they need to know. So it's really neat to see what he's doing and to see how it can be expressed in a modern way. The stories he's accessing too, I think he goes very deep, much deeper than, say, my children clients or even my young adults. But I think he lays the foundation for a method for
That's
mental
good to
health.
hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It's actually practical. That's great.
Oh, I think so. Very, yeah. But when you dig into these stories, anyone's story, it's complicated, it's convoluted, it's not linear. You try to pull the thread and or pull the yarn, and it's this jumbled mess. But because I think it's not a linear process at all. Yeah.
Okay. Janet, were you going to say something there?
Going to say, and I was going to ask Lori about this. I was going to say, Lori, I want you to, what's your opinion? There was one reading earlier on, it was near the first, 5 or 6 maybe, where I don't know who was being quoted, but somebody was saying, maybe it was the writer philosopher who was talking about what spirituality is like now in a material world. What was
Oh, yeah. That's Ken Wilber. Yeah.
And there was a quote saying, here we are where everything's seen through the senses, through the body, through surface. And yet I was kind of confused thinking, well, when I do a meditation retreat, for example, they really do and even in therapy and even in expressive arts, all of them actually, we trying to focus on sort of a sense of embodiment, being aware of the senses, being aware of where the physical body is, being aware of this material world in the sense that it grounds us. So that there was something about that quote that kind of jarred me, because I think, for example, in meditation, they say, be aware of what's coming in through the eyes, be aware of what's coming in through the ears, the sense of sound, being aware of body sensations as a way of bringing the mind and the body together in the moment as a very positive thing. And in expressive arts, we also talk about, the strength of the senses of each of the art forms uses one of the senses. So visual arts is a little bit more visual, but also tactile because we're holding, pastels and paint brushes. Music is more auditory, dance is more kinesthetic. So, drama is more kinesthetic and verbal, so auditory, like all of the really focusing on the senses as a way of being present and of a way of knowing. So I found that quote a little bit confusing, actually.
Well, he's not describing people who meditate in that quote.
I would appreciate a chance to say that what I think there's a difference between a kind of, as Ken Wilber says, this kind of flat, unmindful kind of play on the physical field, and all of our senses in our body, we also can spiritualize that. And I think Jung was really looking at spiritualizing our embodiment.
Nicely put. Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you remember the quote Abdu'l-Baha talks about with the acquisition of knowledge? He talks about using your senses, but it's not like the only tool for acquisition of knowledge. Is that ring a bell?
It does, but I can't summon up the rest of it. Sorry.
Yeah, me neither. Okay. But he does sort of credit like this, be using the senses as a valid tool, but it's not like the only way to acquire knowledge.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll see if I can find it.
So, Thomas, have you got a very short comment or question? Or because we were out of time now.
I would just like to say that I think it would be interesting for someone who could download a AI model, because they're modularized now, not just general. You can download your own limited amount of AI program, and then you could have Carl Jung's Red Book just inserted into that large language model on your computer. And I think that would be very interesting for how it would assist an individual in doing this kind of meditative introspections and visualizations.
What you would need to do, though, is first digitize that Red Book, and there's copyright issues around it.
Yeah, that's true.
I did try to get AI to tell me what page references certain things were in the Red Book, and it said that it's not accessible for that very reason. So that's a bit of a hurdle. But I understand the place you're coming from. I think that would be fascinating. And Bill, you had your hand up there for a while and then put it down.
Well, I certainly didn't want to interfere with what you guys were doing. It was really good stuff. I just wanted to say real quick, that Lynette was saying that it takes a long time for people to come to a certain place, and that's happening in the psychology and industry as well. And that to me, that really pointed sharply to the value of what you're doing, is that in a way I slightly disagree with Lynette. I shouldn't do that, but and that is that it does take a long time, but when it does, it can happen very quickly. But it can only happen. People can, in our times right now, a lot of things are happening very quickly, and that when it comes time to move in that direction, it could happen very quickly, but only if it's there to move to. And the value of what you're doing is helping to ensure that set of awareness, that set of consciousness is there for when people are ready for it to move to. Otherwise, in my mind, it could potentially atrophy if there weren't people like the Jungian supporters and someone like you taking it into a broader perspective of how it relates to things like the Baha'i faith or religion as a whole, and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to point out that kind of identifies the huge potential value of what you're doing.
Well, all of this has to fall on fertile ground. And what I'm hearing now in this presentation is this is fertile ground, that we're able to explore something like this the way we are. Not every place is as fertile as this is to receive this. But I congratulate you on this wonderful piece of work, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, well, that sounds like a great place to stop.
Mark, if anybody wants to investigate Pythagoras further, Baha'u'llah mentions him in the Tablet of Wisdom, that he acquired wisdom from the treasury of prophethood. I've investigated him a little bit. He's a very fascinating figure. Does that mean he was a prophet? I don't know. It sure looks that way. But that's what Baha'u'llah says about him in the Tablet of Wisdom. He acquired wisdom from the treasury of prophethood. So what does that mean? Of course, we know him for the Pythagorean theorem because he thought everything was expressed mathematically and through numbers and so on. That was one of his main teachings. He also taught the immortality of the soul as well, and that it could be purified. And very fascinating figure.
Okay, I've had my fascination quota for the night. I think I might be close to a heart attack, so I think we better cut it off right there.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll see you in a week. Take care of yourselves. We're going to talk about the dead next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Linda. Bye, everybody. Allow up.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody.